Hello, everybody. As organizations prioritize automation for processes across functions, CIOs must explore strategies to unlock momentous new capabilities, reduce costs, as well as increase efficiencies. Intelligent automation, as we all know, is a critical business strategy, but a one size fits all strategy simply won't work anymore. CIOs must distinguish between business processes and IT processes. IT is the backbone of any organization and must operate at a pace faster than the rest of the business, with an automation strategy that is resilient and future proof. So, the big question here is how do you ensure your IT automation strategy delivers maximum benefit by unlocking the potential for hyperspeed in executing IT processes, delivering agile decision making, and whilst at the same time enabling process efficiencies to deliver accelerated growth? We are delighted to welcome Vijay Kurkal, the CEO of Resolve.io today to talk about the same. Welcome, Vijay.
Yeah, thank you, Aisha. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm excited to have this conversation.
Likewise. Now, Vijay, you are in the middle of the entire hyper automation that's driving the businesses forward. How do you embrace this rapidly changing digital world and make the best automation choices? Now, that's a question that most organizations are grappling with in today's date. What is your thought on this?
Yeah, look, we are in an extremely exciting time because, look, on the positive side for CIOs and IT, there is no time better than today because what the pandemic and the environment we are living in today has taught us is CIOs and IT is no longer in a back of the house, a cost center. In fact, if you look at it, I mean, digital transformation has accelerated at least by 10 or 20 years in several businesses, where fundamentally their entire business model has shifted online or to some sort of digital medium, right? And so the good news is the CIOs are at the forefront of it, and they're delivering all of these wonderful services and capabilities that directly impact the top line of the business, right? So fundamentally, it's a fantastic time. But now comes in the problem. So how does a CIO sustain and deliver all of these new businesses, applications, along with several legacy applications and other things that they've been maintaining all through in, again, the most cost-effective manner, but more importantly than that, in a service level that this new audience has gotten used to, right? Because again, like you, me, and everyone, we are hypersensitive to outages, hypersensitive to, your application going down or having latency issues and so on. So that's the world the CIOs are working on. And now, historically, anytime there was an issue or a problem, CIOs would say, okay, great, my, senior engineer or an L3, L2 will go in and fix it, right? And invariably now the pace at which the innovation is happening, you cannot throw bodies at the problem anymore. And automation is fundamental to it. And again, look, automation is not a new thing, so I don't want to preach as if no CIO has thought about it. But I think no CIO, or I would say very few CIOs, have very strategically thought about automation, right? If I look around, and because I thought it was a fantastic question around how do you make this choice? Because the most common mistake, Aisha, what I see IT organizations make is they do not have a clear thought process on automation, right? IT is fundamentally very siloed. Sorry, I'm getting a lag. Are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so IT is fundamentally siloed. And what happens is without a clear thought process, every single siloed team buys their own point solution, right? And that causes a huge issue. Or they look for the simplest thing, which is to say, okay, I have an ITSM tool or a monitoring tool, and they claim to have an add-on module for automation. Let me just go get that, right? So again, for me, these are approaches that don't go deep into creating automation in a more strategic way. And so the way we would recommend at Resolve.io is for companies to think about automation more as driving a culture, right? It's not around solving the most, the most apparent problem right in front of you today. So it's more around how can IT embrace automation going forward, right? So it's more around, looking for an automation partner that can obviously solve the immediate problems right in front of you, but also has the IP and experience to come to you and say, here is what other companies are doing with automation and things that you're missing out that are low hanging, that should be driving value. Second, immediately, not just, put automation scripts and tools all over the place, but start to translate that into top line ROI. Okay, what are the benefits you're starting to get, be it from a cost point of view or from a service level point of view in terms of how you're responding to the business? And how can someone also come in and embed in a very complex ecosystem? Because, again, you have siloed teams, siloed tools, and all of that. And how can, again, a strategic automation partner help you orchestrate and coordinate all of these IT environment tools? And finally, how can this automation partner help you scale between what you need today to what you need tomorrow, right? And so you need a partner that can really scale automation in a much more no-code or a low-code way, so that you don't need experts to build automation, because then that defeats the purpose. You want automation to be democratized, and everyone in your organization, if they're doing a task, they should be like, okay, I should not be doing the task again. So why not quickly drag and drop and have this process automated, so the next time it comes along, I can automate it, right? So again, long story short, if I were to summarize, I think, Aisha, my observation is, I think too many companies are making impulse decisions on automation without having a thoughtful process and thinking it through strategically around what do they need today, tomorrow, and beyond, and really future-proofing it. And I think that's where Resolve comes in. And we are, excited and happy to be part of the conversation and helping IT organizations really think through this problem statement.
Certainly. Vijay, thank you so much. I think some of the points that you've shared there are so spot on in today's environment. And I'd like to pick on the three of them that I know are very relevant to the Middle East region as well. One of them is obviously the siloed approach, which a lot of organizations have relied on for far too long now. And it obviously has to come to a more long-term value-driven strategy for automation. The other thing that you touched upon was the legacy systems that they're having to deal with, and especially in industries like oil and gas, which are so intensely heavy with the internal infrastructure they have already, dealing with that and making sure that that's refreshed to be part of this whole intelligent automation journey is definitely very important. And third is the democratization of automation, which is predominantly driving the future forward for a lot of the people that are part of this ecosystem. So my question here would be that with now cloud becoming such an important part of intelligent automation, and a genuine desire on the part of organizations as well to see how it can deliver value to organizations, how does the Resolve.ai or IO infrastructure enable that? And what is your view on that?
Yeah, so look, for us, the way we think about the cloud, and we've launched a SaaS solution, which we're very excited about. Look, for us, the way we think about that is, look, that's just one piece of the puzzle to remove the friction in automation adoption. So if I were to think about, look, everyone knows automation is important, right? It's not a new concept. People have been trying to do this for a longest time. And why is this still not really taken up? And why haven't people really adopted automation at scale? And I would use a similar analogy, which is there's a lot of friction in the process, Ayusha, right? It's a very similar thing as, look, all of us know we need to be going to the gym and working out, okay? It's a known thing. We all know the benefits, but it's still very difficult to do, right? It's just, you need to setup time, going to the gym is painful, etc. And if I were to take the analogy, it's the same thing with automation. I think what companies struggle with is to say, one, they don't know where to automate, what to automate. Number two, to automate, you need to codify and standardize the process. And that's actually a great benefit of automation. In fact, a lot of IT shops, it's just a lot of tribal knowledge. They haven't really codified it. And if you say, okay, how do we do this? Sorry, I think it's John in the network shop is the one that knows it. But yeah, we need to wait till he comes back, right? And it's as much as we smile, unfortunately, when I go and have these conversations with IT leaders, this is sadly the state of truth, right? And again, a lot of people are panicking because if John retires or especially in today's economy finds another job, because people are switching jobs at rapid scale right now, fundamentally puts the companies at risk. And third, then okay, for each time I need to build an automation, I need to code it, how long is the process, I need to test it, etc. So as you can see, there's just too much friction in the process. And so the way we think about it is around how do you remove the friction, right? Step number one, the way you remove the friction is by at least giving an option. Again, remember, we have multiple deployment options. If there are companies for security reasons or a variety of other, their own internal guidelines, might prefer an on-premise installation. We do support that. However, a lot of companies, as you said, today are moving towards the cloud. And they say, okay, look, I want a cloud-based solution so that I don't need to spend time deploying infrastructure, managing it, and worrying about when things go wrong with that. And so we immediately accelerate it. So we give you an instance and you can just start building automation today. In fact, within hours, you can build out your first automation, right? So that's number one. The second piece of removing friction for us is, not just giving you an empty cloud environment, but we will give you a library of pre-built automations that we know, again, by an 80-20 rule, that other customers in similar IT environments are struggling with and want to automate, right? And so those processes, again, be it pre-built templates, be it integration to other tools that might exist in this particular IT environment, and codification and documentation of the process, et cetera, it's all right there in that cloud SaaS environment. So makes the deployment of the first few automations as quickly as possible. And again, coming back to my gym analogy, look, a lot of statistics have shown that, look, in the first 3 months, if you have a very positive experience and you really like it, enjoy it, and you're getting some results, the likelihood of you sticking to that is much greater than, look, if you have a miserable experience in the first 3 months, guess what? That's your New Year resolution ends by February and you're out of the gym, right? And that's our the way of our framework, which is we want not just it to be easy, but we want the customers to get immediate ROI and results within the first 2 to 3 months. Then it starts to become a culture within the organization. So it's not just about then automating what's in front of you. Then we want the IT teams to think about what else can I automate, right? And so hopefully that answers at least part of your question, Ayesha.
Definitely, Vijay. And I think, the part where you're talking about instant ROI, or at least a quick ROI within the 2 or 3 months, is so important, because even for the CIOs to get further executive sponsorship and get the backing of the management team in order to go ahead and automate other processes and other functions is extremely vital as well. And again, it all comes back to the automation strategy and how well it has been thought through. And what you started with initially was that whole process, that a lot of the time that strategy has not been thought of as a long-term strategy. Now, if we look at it with that lens, and especially the problem identification lens, how would you say is a CIO should be approaching it? Because as you're rightly saying that, you've got to be looking long-term, you've got to be looking at various stages of ROI in that entire automation journey orchestration. How should a CIO put that lens on, which talks about problem identification, which talks about the right use case, and eventually talks about how you're going to scale that enterprise-wide?
Yeah, it's a great question again. And especially if you think about on the surface, this is what a CIO is dealing with today, right? Which is he has multiple teams. So there's a network team, storage team, server team. I mean, this is all on the infrastructure side. And then you have your operation teams on the service desk side. Then you have your database application team. So you have all of these teams siloed. And every single engineer or IT expert within each of the teams are doing completely different tasks, right? So someone's restarting a database, configuring it, someone's doing backup and recovery. And so on the surface, it feels very daunting. And you feel like, wait, where do I start? What do I automate, right? And this is one part of the friction I spoke about earlier. But look, having looked at this problem, for several years and having spoken to hundreds of, customers and other industry leaders, look, I try to simplify this, right? And again, there is an 80-20 approach you can do it. If I take most of what IT operation does, right? So I'm not talking about the DevOps that's building new applications. So this is more around IT operations team that manage and maintain existing applications and existing services. They are, if I were to simplify and say, okay, I know each one individually is doing something different, but what are the common themes? What are they really doing, right? And if I really bubble it down, most, again, 80-20, I'm simplifying, most people do about three categories of work, Aisha. So one, the first thing, the most critical piece of work is responding to outages, okay? If there is an outage, invariably, you don't know if it's a network outage, storage outage, application, you just know the application is down, but you don't know where it is. And there's a huge amount of manual work done in validating the outage, diagnosing where the issue is, problem identification, and then actually going and remediating it, right? So I would argue that is one category of work that all of the silo teams do it. Sometimes they need to come together to go solve it, or sometimes it's much more apparent where the issue is and that particular team has to respond to do it, right? And this is the most critical. And I start with that as a number one because that impacts service levels of application, because no CIO wants their e-commerce app being down, or if you're in the oil and gas industry, there's a lot of mission critical applications, that your distributed teams are using, and you don't want those applications to be down. Number two, there's tons and tons of service requests, because invariably, what's happened is, in fact, during the pandemic, one of the analogy I use is overnight, CIOs used to support, 10, 20, maybe 100 offices, depending on the size of the company you are. But all of a sudden, with every single employee remote, now they're supporting, 20,000 offices, right? Because everyone is separate and everyone has some kind of an issue. There's service requests coming in from all across your employee base. It could be as simple as password reset, like I'm logged out, or it could be things like, hey, I've got a new employee, I need to onboard, I need to offboard someone, or it could be, hey, I need to provision a new environment, I need to restart something. So tons and tons of requests coming from not just your internal stakeholders, but also external customers and stakeholders. And IT teams are responding to that on a daily basis, right? And the third one is, the first two are very reactive, but the third one, again, IT is trying to be proactive, right? IT wants to detect issues before things fail. So there is a lot of monitoring tools that IT has put together everywhere, right? But what does monitoring tools do? They give you more data and they give you more alerts, but someone has to act on it. And that's the third category of work that IT teams are doing, which is they are constantly looking at tons and tons of data, looking at dashboards and figuring out what to do, and then actually going and doing it, right? And so if you look at all of these three categories, and if you see the common denominator, it is tons of bodies that are responding to work on these three things. And now the other good news is all of these three categories are in IT is very ticket-based or data-driven, right? So there is data points around what these outages, I can exactly know what are the number of outages or performance issues, latency issues, or degradations you've had over the last month. Similarly, service requests, they're all cataloged in your ITSM tool. And similarly, alerts, again, depending on where they catalog it, you have various databases of alerts and alert storms and events that you've had. So again, it could be in different places. It could be in one place. So there's a lot of data out there. But I think where CIOs struggle with is to then make sense of the data and say, what can I automate? And that's where companies like us who work with this data on a daily basis can help us. We've actually have a machine learning algorithm that goes in, looks at all of the data, and immediately gives out recommendations for customers around, okay, look, here are the things to automate first. And we can get that going right away. And within 3 months, we can automate this. Within 6 to 12 months, we can automate the second set of things. And so I think that's kind of what you were looking for, which is on the surface, it feels daunting. But I think with the right partner, we can really map out an automation journey around where it's a crawl, walk, run. So where do we begin today? How do we scale automation in phase 2, phase 3? And this is the journey, which, again, if you want to think through this strategically, I would highly recommend companies to really think about it this way.
Absolutely, Vijay. And one of the things that I'm picking up from what you're just saying is that having that intuitive knowledge is obviously important. But more importantly, when you're dealing with vast amount of infrastructure, vast amounts of data, you've also got to have a lot of reliance on the machine learning, the AI part of the journey to be able to guide you over there. Now, one of the things that has obviously changed in the last few years is the buzzword intelligent automation, which traditionally was always RPA, and it stayed like that for a wide range of time, with business processes and IT automation taking place accordingly. With the advent of intelligent automation, things have actually become far more interesting, if I may use that term, for the CIOs. How would you say intelligent automation and RPA are different, and how are they impacting business processes right now? You just touched upon the usage of data. You touched upon all of the data mining effort that's going in. So obviously that process mining, that process identification is all part of that journey when you're putting together your automation strategy. How would you say IA delivers benefits different to what RPA was delivering?
Yeah, so look, RPA solves the need for automation in front office and back office, okay? And not really in IT. So it's more in HR, finance, and a bunch of other functional areas within an organization, okay? And the reason for that is RPA as a technology, if you really, again, I'm going to completely simplify and dummy down the technology, Aisha, just to make things simple. What RPA is a lot of, it records your keystrokes and mouse movements, right? And it's essentially creating a macro which says, okay, if you're doing this work and these are kind of the movement you're doing, and this is the data you're filling from this sheet, etc. All right, great. Let me record it. And now let's start to use this, what they call it bots. And let's use this bots because I'm filling X many invoices or purchase orders or so on. Now let's let this bot go and do it, versus me trying to just do this dummy work of, just filling this data in from this file over here. And so I think that technology works in the front office and the back office area because that's the nature of the work. And again, I don't want to trivialize it because I want to be careful. It works and it delivers an amazing amount of value. And again, I think you spoke about ROI. And RPA has proven that it's driven an incredible amount of ROI in the areas of HR, finance, and a few other functional areas. But now it's created an interesting dynamic because most RPA initiatives were spearheaded by either the CIO or the CFO because they are naturally own the HR and the finance processes, and they've been able to strip out significant amount of costs and also drive efficiency. And so now, like as you said, the spotlight is on the CIO, because if you think about it, IT is the next biggest, I would say, cost center, or where people are. And so there is a spotlight from the CFO and the COO to look at the CIO and saying, okay, now what are you going to do in your shop, right? And so, look, there's two ways for CIOs to look at it. One, they could feel the pressure to say, okay, now I need to do something about it. Or they can look at this as an opportunity. They can look at this to say, okay, look, automation is being embraced by the organization. Here is my chance to not only go in and drive an amazing automation strategy within IT, but also de facto take over the other automation, from the organization, other automation strategy from the CIO and the CFO, because they have other things to work on the business. And think about, there's no better person in the organization to do process optimization than the CIO. So I think there's a huge opportunity here for the CIO to really, to use their lens to drive a lot more in the organization. And yes, maybe the first phase was done by the CFO and the COO's office. But I think, again, remember, automation is not a once and done thing. It is going to be living. It's a culture. And you'll need to constantly be looking for new things to automate. And I think CIOs in the next phase of automation have a huge journey to go play. So that's one of my first points. And the second question you asked is, what's the difference between RPA and the intelligent automation for IT? I think the main difference, Ayesha, is, look, in IT, we spoke about screen scraping, recording keystrokes, etc. You cannot do that in IT, mainly because, look, most of the applications you're working on in IT don't even have a user interface. A lot of the engineers are actually working and coding in environments that are completely different and have no standard user interface. And second, IT's tools are changing on a monthly, weekly basis, right? So today they might use X tool, tomorrow they might consolidate X and Y, and they have a different tool. So their environment is actually changing extremely rapidly. It's complex. And so the technology you need, in fact, by definition, is more intelligent, because you need to do a lot more back-end integration. So you need to understand the intent and purpose of what they're trying to do, and then have a lot more back-end integrations to go enable and do that. So I think the technology is fundamentally different. And I think this is a great time for CIOs to embrace the IT automation, intelligent IT automation in their environment, and also then use that lens to start to transform some of the projects that are already underway within RPA and other pieces of their own businesses.
Certainly. And Vijay, in terms of future of work, which is obviously driving a lot of this automation that we're talking about, where does IT fit in this landscape?
So when you say future of work, could you elaborate so that I can be more specific in my answer?
Sure. It's more about, the way we're now in the remote working space, the fact that, it doesn't seem to be changing. People have gotten used to it. The fact that they will have all these multiple, service stations to fulfill, and yet there's automation to help them, to drive them, to guide them, and make their lives easier. So how do you feel that, in this entire new working environment that we are, already in, for that matter, how do you see IT being able to lessen the load on themselves, so to say, via automation?
Yeah. So again, it's a great point, because IT is facing pressures from two directions. One, let's talk about the demand, right? So demand, like as you said, the internal demand. Now, all of your internal employees are all over the country or the world, in fact, right? And so how do you support all of them to be seamless, productive, etc.? And IT is constantly looking at it. And then the other demand is external customers and other things. And again, remember, through the pandemic, most organizations have delivered new digital capabilities, new services, new applications, and new products. And so that has scaled exponentially, right? And now, while all of this has happened, now let's look at the supply side. Number one, no IT leader can come and say that, oh yeah, my IT budget has gone up 3x, right? You will never hear them say that. So essentially, they are still supplying or delivering to all of that demand of IT services with still the same amount of budget. Or again, look, maybe for some companies which are doing well, the budget's probably gone up by maybe 10-20%. But really, okay, 20% more budget, but you're delivering 4x or 5 times more of the services that you're doing, right? So the question is, one, how do you squeeze more of your IT team? So there in itself lies a conundrum of how do you drive productivity and efficiency gains from your employee base. So that's point number one on the supply side. Point number two on the supply side is, given even IT teams are working remotely and even their own employees are working remotely, it's creating another supply pressure, which is teams are resigning. So, you've heard of the term of the Great Resignation. And look, lots and lots of teams that we talk to are struggling to fill in. They have tons of open recs. They have a lot of seats to hire, but they're not able to hire fast enough and catch up with people going to another job. And again, that's because people are remote. Everyone's it's like a mercenary. They can just switch to another job at the same. So location or place is no longer a criteria. So people are doing that. And second, it's also a dynamic that's also happening around the resignation front is a lot of people are kind of looking at this entire macro environment as, what do I really want to do? Is this what I want to do? And so a lot of people are in fact retiring and just moving away from this and trying to do something else that they love or they're passionate about, and et cetera, and kind of going in that direction, right? And so, and I mentioned that as an example because we have one of the largest telco in Europe that have embraced Resolve automation and embedded it and scaled it out for this main purpose. They say is that they're going to have a ton of baby boomers in their IT organization that they expect to retire, and they worry with the pandemic the retirement is going to get accelerated. But they feel like some of the jobs, especially in managing the infrastructure, managing the data center, and responding to outages, et cetera, is not that attractive to the millennials. So therein lies a gap that they need to fill. And in their mind, the equation can only be solved through automation, right? Like that's one example, right? But that's an acute example. But there are lots of other examples where we spoke about demand and supply. There is going to be a huge gap in terms of the demand for digital services that IT provides and IT supply to actually go deliver that seamlessly, right? And the only way you plug that gap and solve this equation is to really not just start with automation, but really think about how do I drive automation at scale? Because otherwise, I mean, really the way the digital transformation is exploding, IT leaders, if they don't future-proof it today, they will have to go ask for 2x, 3x IT budget in 3 to 5 years. And that's not going to be a pleasant conversation.
Definitely, Vijay, and more than the budget, I think it's also the lag in you responding to the changing environment,
Yeah.
And which comes back to the point of this entire digital transformation that organizations are going through, whether it's increasing your own ability to service your customers through self-serve, or it is driving the digital twin agenda or the metaverse agenda as we are sitting and talking about. How do you see CIOs best utilize automation to accelerate this digital transformation that actually no organization can avoid at this point in time?
Yep, absolutely. And so you're spot on. So there's a couple of things that are happening, right? So one, to offload work from their IT teams, I think it's a right trend. You'll see a lot of chat ops and kind of self-serve type of technologies that are being embraced, and I think that's fantastic, right? And I think that we are at the tip of tip of the iceberg today in terms of what we are doing with self-service, right? And I think, look, we are in phase 1.0, where some of the very, very common tasks are solved with self-serve. It's like, great, I'm talking to a bot to say I'm logged out of my Outlook account. Can you reset my password, etc.? So some of those things are done. But invariably, this self-serve can go into solving lots of other issues, right? But then again, remember, most of the bots are focusing around more natural language processing, which is to say, okay, I'm converting a human conversation into predicting, hey, I predict this is what they're asking for, okay? And saying this is the need. But now, okay, who solves that need, right? And especially as the need starts to get complex, who solves it? And that's where you need an automation engine on the back end of your chat ops or any type of front end engine, right? So that's the only way you can start to, again, when we're talking about self-service and chat ops technology, you can start to drive that at a scale with having a very robust automation kind of on the back end of it. So that's number one. And number two, and a lot of companies are doing is to say, okay, this is not my problem. I'm going to give this to a managed service provider, and it becomes their problem, right? But I think this is where companies need to be careful, because I think you hit the nail on the head. When I said it's a budget, you said it's not just a budget, it's a service level issue, right? Because that's important. And I think this is where there could be some misalignment by just blindly going to a managed service provider at the cheapest cost. Because think about, what is the incentive for a managed service provider? They charge you based on time and material, and they just want to throw more bodies at the problem, right? Yes, they'll throw bodies in low-cost countries, so it's cheaper than, say, in Middle East or Europe or some of those areas. So you get some kind of a cost arbitrage. But that is no longer enough, right? As you said, it's all about service level. So if the process is not automated, and if it is still going and touching 20 different bodies to go get the work done, guess what? The outage is still 6 hours, but that's no longer acceptable. You want the outage to be resolved within an hour or 30 minutes at the most, right? And so again, the only way you're going to get all of that is if CIOs and IT leaders take an active role in not just offloading the problem and saying it's not mine, but actually take a much more strategic and a proactive approach and saying, okay, great, I'm not only offloading the work, but you need to promise or you need to deliver certain service level commitments and improvements, knowing that the only way the MSP or anyone else, any other partner they're offloading to, will be able to do that is by embracing automation, right? So long way of saying, yes, there are some techniques or trends coming up where some of the problem can be mitigated, but it still does not give the IT leaders the free path to be like, oh, this is done. You still need to really pay a lot of attention to it, because on the back end of both of these trends that we're seeing, if you're not really thinking about automation strategically, you're going to come back to the same problem in 12 to 18 months.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Vijay. It was lovely talking to you today, and we're really looking forward to having the Resolve.io team on site at the Intelligent Automation AI and Bot Show. I think a lot of what you've said today resonates so well with what the need in the market is, what the pain point of a lot of the CIOs is. So we'd love for them to be able to understand a bit more about how Resolve.io can actually help them in being equipped for the future, but also predominantly making sure that their journey is strategic, it's long term, and it delivers value, which we've just spoken about. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aisha. Really enjoyed the conversation, and looking forward to participating in the event.
Likewise. Take care. Bye for now.